Hi, I'm Susie Larson. Thank you for listening to Susie Larson Live. Faith Radio podcasts are only possible because of your support. So thanks for giving, and thanks for sharing with a friend.
It's only just a matter of...
You're listening to an encore presentation of Susie Larson Live.
So the back row is your glide. 'Cause walking just won't do dance. You don't have to know how to. Ever since God's got you there.
Welcome to Susie Larson Live. Always so honored to get to spend this time with you. In fact, I look forward to bringing you conversations every single day that hopefully inspire you in your faith walk, that deepen your understanding of God's love and His Word, and that heightens your awareness of His very real presence in your life. Here's a few questions for you. One is your inner critic alive and well? I mean, do you hear that voice pretty regularly? Do you find yourself berating yourself for not having enough faith, or for all the things you should do or shouldn't have done? Or maybe you berate yourself over not getting enough laundry done, or your inbox is too full, or because your feelings feel like a burden. Well, my guest today says this: change starts when you finally stop beating yourself up for the way you feel and instead say, you know what? I do feel this way, and I'm going to do something about it. Dr. Alison Cook joins me today to talk about how to discern the difference between false guilt and God-given conviction, how to move from comfortable numbing to courageous conversations, how to name what you're feeling and then move to a plan of action. We'll draw from her brand new book, I Shouldn't Feel This Way: Name What's Hard, Tame Your Guilt, and Transform Self-Sabotage into Brave Action. Got a handful of copies to give away today. You can text the word book if you want in on the drawing, 877-933-2484. Quick announcement before we hear from Dr. Cook. If you're new to the Faith Radio listening family, which we've got new listeners all the time, we want to say, first of all, welcome. And we'd sure love to send you a welcome pack. You can request that pack today by texting the word welcome. And here's the number. Text the word welcome to 877-933-2484. Now, let me tell you about my guest. We'll get her on the show. Dr. Alison Cook is a therapist and host of the Best of You podcast. She's certified in internal family systems therapy. She's the author of The Best of You, co-author of Boundaries for Your Soul, widely recognized as an expert at intersection of faith and psychology. Dr. Alison empowers individuals to heal from past wounds, develop a strong sense of self, and forge healthy relationships. And the book we're talking about today is her brand new one, I Shouldn't Feel This Way: Name What's Hard, Tame Your Guilt, Transform Self-Sabotage into Brave Action. Dr. Cook, welcome back to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Susie. I always enjoy our conversations.
Yeah, me too. Looking forward to this conversation. And before we dig into the content, I ask the same question every day. That first question is always the same, and it's more personal in nature. And it's just this: in your time with the Lord these days, what's He been impressing upon your heart?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, knowing you would ask, and I write about it a little bit, but it's something I've really been dwelling in, is the story of Jacob wrestling with God. And what does it mean for me to really wrestle with God instead of kind of blowing the easy answers in my own life? How do I create the time to sit with God with some of what I don't understand in my life, and not jump to easy answers, but instead kind of that wrestling with God? And I found it to be really powerful lately. It's not always the most pleasant place to be spiritually, but I'm finding a lot of deeper formation in it. So I've been grateful for that lately.
I love that. I love that so much. And I wonder at times, how much do we miss out on because we take a passive stance and a passive approach to our walk with God? I mean, you just wonder. It's like, what if we engaged? What if we wrestled for an understanding, for perspective, for a right perspective, maybe with someone we are struggling with, rather than going, it is what it is. And easy to shrug our shoulders, but I know God wants more participation than that,
Yeah, it's powerful. And it requires some of that. Like, it is a wrestling match. It is I don't like this, God, or I want to just get this done, or I want to just take the easy way here. It sometimes requires me to ask other people to wait, which is hard for people pleaser parts of me, because I need to spend the time I need to spend with the Lord. And It's a real discipline, but I find it bears incredible fruit, even just in the patience with myself and with God.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. Okay, let's jump in here. When someone, and you in your practice, you'll hear this, but I'm sure you hear it out in the world as well. But when you hear someone say, "I shouldn't feel this way," what does that initially tell you? What are your first thoughts when you hear someone berate themselves for the way they feel?
Well, first of all, it's super common. I think
Yeah.
most of us berate ourselves for the way we feel and don't even realize it. And so, honestly, even when someone is able to recognize that, to me, that's a great first step because just recognizing the voice of, "Ah, I shouldn't feel this way, or I'm such a bad person, or I hate myself for that," whatever that is a huge step forward to even recognize that that's going on inside of you. And that's kind of where the name of the book came from, right? It was just me realizing that is so often the first thing I say inside my soul is I shouldn't feel this way, right? To just try to get something out, get rid of something. But just to, oh, that's where I actually have to start. I'm feeling something I wish I didn't feel.
Mm. And this is, such an important moment because if you just berate yourself, but never do any further investigative work, there's been times I've told my husband that about, something that landed on, not anything he did, but something, in social media or something in some kind of encounter where I go, I shouldn't feel that way. And what I'm saying is I know better, but my soul doesn't
Mm-hmm.
seem to know better. I know better, theologically or
Mm-hmm.
intellectually,
Mm-hmm.
but obviously my soul doesn't know it because I'm having a feeling about this thing. And I wonder how often we just sort of let that thing circle our heads and we kind of live at this low level of misery rather than facing it head on, which is, I think, what the point of your book, isn't it?
Yeah, sometimes I think about it, like even when you said that, it's like we have these inner legalists or inner judgmental parts where we're judging other parts of ourselves. And we think that's actually going to lead to a better path. And it doesn't. We know that it doesn't. We know that's not the way of Jesus. We know that's not the voice of Jesus. But we can sometimes dupe ourselves into thinking that is the voice of God to just beat us up without really, and so the first thing we have to do is really, name that isn't the voice of God. That inner guilt tripper, that inner critic, that inner shamer, that inner judger. It's a part of us that's kind of picked up that strategy for whatever reason, but it doesn't actually lead us to the change we want. It actually throws obstacles in our path because it just leaves us stuck. Like you said, we just get looped in to that cycle of defeat.
I want to read this. You said, when we're stuck, our minds become a confusing tangle of mixed up feelings and conflicting thoughts. This jumbled up knot is a cry for gentle care and patient attention. Do you hear that, friend? If you've got something circling your head and that you maybe have lived with a long time, no shame, no condemnation. It is a cry for gentle care and patient attention. But most of us haven't been given the tools required to unravel it. And I'd love for you to talk about just first step someone would take the second they realize there's a disconnect here. I kind of know better to say this feeling probably doesn't accurately represent my life, and the story I'm telling myself, or it feels disproportionate to the trigger or the way that I just got poked. What should they do with that information then?
Yeah, it's funny. Even just when you were reading that, I sometimes think about the metaphor of a necklace or a delicate piece of jewelry that gets a knot in it. What's the first thing you have to do? You have to really slow down and get very fine in your movements. Like untangling the knot of a necklace is really hard. You have to really focus. You have to slow yourself down. You can't the more you pull or tug or try to, force it, the tighter up that knot gets. And it's really the same thing inside our own soul. When you notice that knot, and it doesn't feel pleasant, I don't want to be angry with my kids. I don't want to feel hatred. Sometimes it gets to hatred. I don't want to feel hatred for this other person. I don't want to feel envy. I don't want to feel less than, constantly comparing myself to other people. Whatever the thing is, it's a knot. Right? It's of course we don't want that knot to be there, but the solution isn't to, again, push harder. The solution is to go, oh my gosh, I've got to slow myself down and begin to notice what are the different threads in there. And I call them truth pieces. in the book, what are the different pieces of the truth? And this gets into the first practice that I teach in the book. There's 3 practices. I call them practices because they take practice. They're not a one size fits all. They take practice. These are almost daily practices we have to learn. It gets easier over time. But the first one is naming, just naming the different pieces of the situation without shame, without blame, and most importantly, the thing that's hardest for all of us, without jumping to a solution. Because most of us don't want to slow down to name the different pieces of what we're feeling unless we can fix it. But the problem is we can't fix something we don't fully understand. So we have to, first of all, just slow down enough to go, wait a minute. First of all, what am I feeling? Let's just name it. That in and of itself can bring relief. I'm feeling really vindictive toward this person. Or I'm feeling really ragey at my kids. I'm feeling really jealous about this friend group. That's just what's true. Whether I should feel that way or shouldn't feel that way or what I do with those feelings, we haven't even gotten there yet. This is what's true in this moment. I am feeling this way. Without shame, without blame, we start to kind of become just a namer. I call it becoming a namer. Just naming what is. This is what's happening right now. And that does something in your brain. It brings online your prefrontal cortex, the ordering part of your brain that just says, yeah, here's what's true. We'll figure it out. But it gets you out of just that amygdala, the firing of all the emotional feelings, right? And brings in that meaning-making part of your brain to just say, okay, I'm angry. I'm angry. And sometimes, Susie, I think about it like parenting a young child. You know, your young child comes running to you in a blaze of emotions. I hate those other kids. They're so mean. I'm so mad, right? We don't immediately go to, here's what you need to do, right? We first pause and hold them close and say, it's okay. We soothe them. You're mad. I get it. Something happened that was hard. You're hurting. I get it, right? We don't jump into fixing the problem or shaming them. We just name and validate, you're in a pickle right now. This is tough. I get it. And that's the kind of thing we have to do with ourselves when we notice these emotions that we don't like.
I love that so much. You're not self-condemning. You're not shrugging it off. You're facing it head on with, as you say, gentleness and patience. And the way you talk about these truth pieces, I want to give you an example, friend, that if you're listening, so that you can kind of disentangle from like a heated emotion that the enemy really wants you to turn that into a blanket statement that might be false to get you to make maybe a permanent decision in a temporary situation. This is why it's so important to just sort of untangle this stuff. But Dr. Alison gives these examples of truth pieces. Let's just say you took inventory and these things were all true for you. I'm frustrated. I'm not entirely ungrateful. There's part of me that loves the life I have. Some things are okay. Some things are hard. But a lot of me feels misunderstood. I think if someone were to hear that, they would go, I do feel all those things at some point, and you need to know you're not alone. So as you're piecing these out, do you kind of zoom back to get a better picture of what you really believe?
Exactly. And that gets to that second step of framing. The minute we stop shaming ourselves, stop beating ourselves up, and it's like a puzzle. I use the metaphor of a puzzle in the book. And you just start looking at the puzzle pieces, right? We're trying to get the bigger picture. And we can't do that when we're beating ourselves up. But the minute you start to just name, okay, there's over there, kind of like what the list from the book, okay, over there's a lot of grief. But over there's some things I'm really happy about. And that's sort of what's confusing, right? How do these things go together? But that's how you start to see that larger picture of your life, which is a mixture of lots of different feelings. And in this, so it does allow you, to your point, to zoom out a little bit and go, okay, there is some anger or some resentment or some grief here. It doesn't mean I need to blow up this relationship entirely, because there's also a lot of good in this relationship. And so at that moment, you begin to identify, okay, this is a part of the larger narrative. It does need my attention, but you begin to build trust with yourself. I also can give those parts of what's happening in my life right now my attention, knowing that all these other things are also true. Again, this is a practice, right? Framing. And I think about it a lot. Like also, if you're someone who hikes, I'm a big hiker. I'll take these hikes in the wilderness where you're in the part of the path where it's a little bit murky. Maybe the trees are really big and there's weeds on the path and you could easily lose your way and it feels kind of like foggy and murky and hard to see. And it's not pleasant. I don't like this. But you begin to orient yourself. You begin, when you're in that situation, you begin to slow yourself down and remind yourself, wait a minute. Here's what got me on this path. I'm on this path for a reason. Something set me on this path. I know where I want to go. So I need to just slow it down right now to take a look at these weeds that are in front of me they're blurring the lines of the path, right? I need to call in the support that I need. Maybe I need to get support. Maybe I need to stop here for a minute, slow it down, stop the forward motion to really take a look at this situation, at this relationship, at this hard situation, whatever's going on, and really notice what is good here, but what is really, really hard. What do I need to kind of weed out through hard conversations, through boundaries? What is okay? What do I need to keep? Right, but you're slowing it down and not just moving forward into action. Because if you don't do the work, that step of framing, of slowing it down, is often the part that people don't want to do. They want to get to that solution. But if you don't slow it down to really take time to pray through it, to talk with your friends through it, to really think about what is really at the root of this challenge. And I can get into some examples of that that I go through in the book.
Let's pause here and take a break and have you get some examples on the other side. But let's pause. And recently I had Dr. Rob Reamer on the show, and the question I asked you was, what's the fear that gets poked when you feel stressed and under pressure? What is the fear that gets poked? This time I want to ask you, what's that recurring emotion that comes up for you? Maybe, or maybe another way to say that is, what's the one that you most berate yourself for? Is it sadness? Is it anger? Is it fear? Where you feel it and you go, I shouldn't feel this way. Like maybe it's a default emotion and it's perpetually the one that you shame yourself for. Is there one? And I'll consider all of these answers anonymous, but is there a recurring emotion that keeps surfacing for you? Do you keep ignoring it? Maybe you just toss it aside and you don't berate yourself, but you're not paying attention to it. Or maybe you are. I'd love to know, because we're going to take a little deep dive into these emotions. What are they telling us? And how do you discern the difference between God getting your attention, God bringing conviction, and really enemy condemnation? Talking to Dr. Alison Cook today. Her book is I Shouldn't Feel This Way. Name what's hard, tame your guilt, transform self-sabotage into brave action. So text me, what is that most perpetual recurring emotion? And then if you'd like to be in on the drawing in a separate text, just text the word book to 877-933-2484. We'll be back in a minute. Faith Radio podcasts are produced by the listener-supported ministry of Faith Radio. If you're interested in becoming a team member, a donor to this ministry, you can support the podcast anytime and donate at myfaithradio.com. Thanks so much for tuning into Susie Larson Live, talking to our friend Dr. Alison Cook, who joins us today to talk about her new book, I Shouldn't Feel This Way. Name what's hard, tame your guilt, and transform self-sabotage into brave action. And you think about it, the enemy always wants you to isolate, always wants you to suffer in silence and alone and being disconnected from others. And Alison writes this, we silently battle ourselves. We silently battle against other people. We don't always know who we can trust. We want the truth, but we also don't want to be misunderstood. We feel hurt or confused by other people's behaviors, but we feel bound by our own loyalty, kindness, or sometimes misguided empathy. We want to be good to others, but sometimes being good to them tightens up a knot inside of us. We'll unpack kind of why that is in a moment. But Doc, I've asked friends to text in feelings, that kind of perpetual feelings that come up. And I'm going to have you give some examples as you were talking about before the break in just a moment. But if you don't mind, I want to read these because I think for every text that comes in, they represent, I'm sure, a great number of people. This dear one says, I'm in an impossible marriage and an extended family. So am Am I continuing in an impossible marriage and extended family? So this, they feel stuck, it sounds like. Any things you'd say to them?
Oh gosh, I think that's a really, really hard place to be. I understand that there's no quick fix answer, first and foremost, when you feel like you are in an impossible situation. I would get curious about what are the elements, what are the pieces that make it impossible, right? Because any kind of blanket statement like that has a whole lot underneath it. There's a
Mm.
whole lot underneath that. So I would get curious. I would be very curious to, with someone, ideally with a trained professional, ideally with a perhaps with a trusted advisor, to really lay out what are the different pieces of that, what makes it impossible. And then, if you're stuck in it, what makes you feel stuck? What are the messages you're telling yourself? So some of the frame acronym that I use to help people frame a situation. So first of all, you've named your feelings, right? The frame action. What are the facts? What are the roots? What are the root causes? What are the root motivations? What audit? When has it been better? When has it been worse? What have you tried? What haven't you tried? What are the messages you're telling yourself? That's the M. And is there any kind of expansion? Anything you could do that would expand your understanding or your perspective of the situation? Those are all framing questions that you begin to ask yourself to really try to flesh out the root. When we're stuck, there's always something at the root, and very often it's not what we think it is.
Mhm.
Doesn't mean that it's any easier. It just means that very often we are stuck and we need other people. To your point, Susie, often we can't get there ourselves. We need trusted advisors, trained professionals to really help us do the work of getting all the way deep under the ground to get at the root and to figure out what are we actually dealing with here? What is the root? And then you get into braving. And there are oftentimes three braving options for any kind of tough situation.
We're going to get to those in a moment, but I think that's so important. I hope you're hearing Dr. Cook say too is, there's always a way. I think when there is an emotion and there's a label on it, stuck or hopeless or impossible, you're going to feel depressed because there's no hope and it's impossible. But there's always a way. Somehow, some way, we might have a bullseye to go, the only solution is this, and that's not going to happen, so I'm stuck. But I think if we surrender to the Lord and we say, show me a way, because you always make a way, He'll show you next steps where you have some autonomy. I think to feel like you have no agency, no choices in the matter, you can start to feel absolutely captive to your stuckness. But there's always something we can do, even if it's not what we think, right?
That's exactly right. Yes. And that agency is so important. And all that work of naming and framing and relentlessly, even though we don't necessarily see the path magically open up for us right away, is the work of giving ourselves agency. Because then when you do get to the braving step, even if the path you end up taking is, this is a situation I can't leave for whatever reason, there's a bunch of different options. But let's say you arrive at the conclusion, I can't leave this situation. I can't change it. But there's a reason that you understand that you've decided to stay and you've made that decision, eyes wide open. And here's what I've done to support myself in making that hard decision, which is a completely different thing than being stuck or trapped.
Wow, very, very good. Here's another one. Insecurity creeps up when my prolonged focus is on myself rather than on Jesus. What say you?
Well, that is a great question. And I would say, first of all, we don't want to focus on ourselves as an end. The end game of focusing on ourselves leads to nowhere. We do want to become self-aware. It's a very different thing. Self-awareness is we become aware of our own emotions, our own thoughts, our own feelings, our own hurts, our own heartaches, and bring those things we become aware of into conversation with God, with Jesus, because it's a relationship. So if we're only focusing on Jesus, sometimes that can be a way out of facing the hard things about ourselves. Jesus sees those hard things about us, and sometimes he holds a mirror up and says, I need you to look at this. I need you to look at this in yourself. And then our job is to do that, take that U-turn to look inside. Oh, yeah, here's that thing I see. We're not doing that as an end in and of itself. We're doing that so that we can bring those things into our relationship with Jesus.
So good. All right. This dear one says fear, anger, shame. Those are all the perpetual emotions that she does not want to feel, but they seem to keep resurfacing.
Yeah, those are really, first of all, I want to say that's normal. Fear, anger, and shame, right? Those are all really normal emotions that most of us feel from time to time. The way through emotions isn't try to make them go away so that we never feel them. Emotions are cues. They're cues that some part of us needs attention. And so the goal of this work is to begin to name, here's when I feel angry. It's this. The step of naming isn't just naming the emotion, it's also naming the precipitating event, becoming a detective, a little bit of a student. When do I feel angry? What evokes it? What triggers it more than not? When don't I feel angry, right? That's also a little bit of that framing, getting to know what evokes the anger, what triggers it, so that you can brave a path to where that anger is softened, that anger is quiet because you've cared for yourself through whatever it is that you needed to care for yourself through. So those emotions are cues that some part of you needs your attention. A lot of us were taught these emotions are bad. These emotions are cues. When we look at the life of Jesus, Jesus had these emotions. We see anger in Jesus. You know, we see, even you could argue when Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane, not wanting to go to the cross. You could argue there was fear there. You could argue there was angst there. He was not excited about that. He was sweating blood, right? Mm-hmm. But he named that and was honest about that with God. And that's what allowed him to then do the thing that God was calling him to do. And so these emotions just make us more human. They actually make us more like Jesus. We don't have to act out of them, but as we name them and honor them and then understand them more deeply, we are able to have more agency in our lives and be healthier in our lives.
You know, you touched on this. We just got a couple minutes here before our next break, but I'd love you to explain the process in our brain when we go from just this swirling emotions to naming it, because I've read in the past, and I don't have that in front of me. I'm sure you can pull that right out. But the idea that like your physiology literally settles down once you've named it. And maybe that's the process like you were talking about where you go from amygdala to the prefrontal cortex. But there's a physiological shift when you go from being at the mercy of just swirling emotions to discerning and identifying what's the cause of those emotions and naming them.
Yeah, it's exactly right. Dan Siegel, who wrote the book Mindsight, talks about how naming is taming, and it's literally a function of the brain. You soothe the limbic firing. When you name an emotion, oh, I'm angry, you bring the thinking part of your brain, the ordering part of your brain online, which calms the firing of the emotional part of your brain. Again, it's not through shaming it. It's through naming it. It just soothes it a little bit. Yeah, I am angry. That's true. Our brains are wired toward what's true, right? That is true. I'm angry, right? There's a calm in that that happens, as you're saying, neurobiologically inside of us.
Wow. So I just want you to think about that, friend. We see a few more texts that have come in. We're going to pause here and take a break. And I want to address a few more of these texts. One is unrelenting fear-based thinking. Another one is the feeling I've messed up. Another one is fear-related. And when we come back, we'll touch on those and others. But we're going to move through the process of naming and then framing and then braving a new path. So naming what's hard, framing your reality, and then braving a new path. Dr. Alison Cook is my guest today. Her brand new book is titled, I Shouldn't Feel This Way. Name What's Hard, Tame Your Guilt, Transform Self-Sabotage into Brave Action. And when we come back, I also want to talk about how do you get just discerning and really good at discerning and making the distinction between God-given conviction and enemy-originated condemnation. Because there are times when the Lord's going to speak to you to go, you keep quitting things. You give up too early. But he's not condemning you. He's not shaming you. He's saying there's this pattern in your life, but there's a fear underneath it. You're afraid to fail, so you sabotage. So we want to just look at how can we be humble and teachable enough so that the Lord can get through when he wants to speak to us about something, but tough enough where we raise up a shield of faith to say, devil, you're not going to condemn me today, and you're not going to condemn me tomorrow. I'm a loved child of God. I'm a work in progress, and I get to be. Dr. Alison Cook is my guest, and we will be back in a minute. Hope you're having a fantastic day. Thanks for tuning into Susie Larson Live, talking to our friend Dr. Alison Cook. Her new book is titled, I Shouldn't Feel This Way. Name what's hard, tame your guilt, and transform self-sabotage into brave action. And I've asked you to text in to tell me about just the perpetual emotion that kind of surfaces that maybe you push down. Maybe you act out of it. Maybe you push it down into the basement and ignore it. Or maybe you attack yourself because you feel it. All of those things are not good for the soul. And so if you don't mind, Doc, we're going to just walk through a few more of these texts, and then I want to really get into your three-pronged approach of naming what's hard, frame your reality, brave a new path. So this dear one says, the attacking emotions are fear and the uncertainty of God's direction. And another one just said, unrelenting fear-based thinking. Anything you want to say in the way of naming those things and maybe reframing those things?
Yeah, I mean, those are really striking images, right? The fear, the unrelenting fear. And when that happens, first of all, doing the naming work with someone, I cannot emphasize that enough, of having someone help you begin the process of naming the different fears. Again, when do I feel, even if it feels like it's always, all the time, really noticing, when do I feel less fearful? What is it? Is it when I first wake up? Is it even if it's really odd or bizarre, to begin to notice that, because that's good information. You're not shaming yourself. You're just looking for some puzzle pieces to complete the picture, because you are not fear. You are not your fear. You are not your anger. That is not all of who you are. You are a beloved child of God. And so those parts of you picked up that fear as a way to try to help you survive. There might be trauma at the root of it. There might be anxiety at the root of it. There might be some pain at the root of it. But begin to notice, when does it show up more than others? When is it not there? What kind of people help reduce it? What makes it go just a little bit away? And begin to take that journey to become a student of your own soul. That's what will lead to healing. And again, don't do that alone. Bring someone alongside of you to look at that with you. None of us was meant to take this journey alone. It's just not how God made us. We were not meant to take this journey alone. So get help. Get someone to come alongside of you and begin to untangle some of those knots, because there is real help and real hope for you on the other side of that.
Boy, that's so good. So taking that advice, I'm looking at this dear one who says, is overwhelmed an emotion? There are many things I know I should do, but it seems so overwhelming that I don't want to do anything. So imagine, dear one, as you're listening to Dr. Alison talk, are there times when you do feel motivated? So you wonder, is there a reality? I'm just wondering, because this is we're just learning as we go here. But you can imagine how you could be paralyzed by overanalysis to the point where you never do anything, and God wants you to do something. So how would this person get unstuck when everything feels overwhelming?
Yeah, again, those binary terms, like everything is overwhelming, everything is fearful. Well, probably when you look at your day, there are moments when you don't feel that way. So begin to notice that, because you want to kind of contrast. You want to begin to notice, oh, that's when I open my inbox, I open my email box, or I open social media, or that friend texts me, and the overwhelm, you'll be surprised that you can get to the root of some of these things. It takes some work. And if there's years of backlog, that's why I say don't do it alone. If there's years of backlog, right? But because sometimes it can feel overwhelming to look at it. But begin to notice, when don't I feel this way? That's as valuable as when you do. To just, because you'll start to notice what sparks it, what triggers it.
So good. So good. Okay, let's get to that question about discerning and making the distinction between God-given conviction and correction, which he's a good father. So he's going to bring correction, and, enemy-originated condemnation.
Well, God doesn't shame us when he shows us the truth about what's going on in our soul. Romans talks about how it's God's kindness that leads us to repentance. And if there's anything I've learned, it's that when we stop, shame keeps us from holy conviction. The enemy wants to just eviscerate us. You're a terrible, miserable being that should never walk on this planet. That's the voice of shame. How dare you? Shame just eviscerates us, and it actually keeps us. I believe that's the voice of the enemy. I believe that is not from the voice of God. It can feel justified in the moment. I'm a terrible person, right? But it doesn't actually help us. God comes in and says, two things can be true. You can be my beloved child. You can have amazing gifts and amazing strengths. And also, you just lied to your kids. Guess what? That's also true. Two things can be true. And he says it with kindness. And he puts that on us, not to hurt us, but to say, and you've also got a problem there. There's something going on there, my dear child. We need to take a look at. That's the voice of God. Shame keeps us from that.
100% agree. Somebody got to text me an amen. I haven't asked for an amen yet, but this is such an important distinction. I feel like if we can discern, if we can know the heart of God and the character of God, we could welcome the discipline and the correction of God. In Hebrews, it says, don't make light. What does it say? And don't make light of the Lord's discipline, and don't lose heart when he rebukes you. So don't make light of it like it's nothing, and don't lose heart like you're nothing. And, you've all met those people where you try to bring a gentle corrective word and they fall apart into a heap and you can't talk with them about anything, right? Or others who just shrug their shoulders and say, not my problem, it's your problem. You can't really have a deep, healthy relationship with either of those two types. And God doesn't want that from us either, where we fall apart like we're nothing, or we shrug it off like it's nothing. So to understand his love is to welcome his correction, because he only wants to mature us and transform us, right?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Okay, so name what's hard. You've really given some good examples of that. Framing your reality. Is there more that you want to say? In fact, I was taking notes. So frame, you use as an acronym, was facts. You've kind of find the facts. R is you root out what's the base truth and the root cause. What's A again?
Audit different strategies you've tried in the past.
Very
what has worked?
good.
When has this happened before? Yeah.
Okay. And then M is messages. Unpack that just a sec.
Messages you tell yourself. Those are the guilting, shaming. What are the messages I tell myself about this? Are they true? Are they not true?
And then expansion.
That's where we get into, do I need more information? Maybe I haven't thought about seeing a therapist. Maybe I don't know enough about boundaries to figure out, how to introduce change into this relationship. How can I expand my understanding?
All right. And what I like about this, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're the expert here, Dr. Alison, but I think some might be afraid to go here, because you're saying this takes some time and space, because these are practices. You got to create time and space to analyze and even diagnose some of these emotions. And some might say, I have seen people who've gone to counseling for many years and they've become perpetual narcissists, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to be so self-focused I can't see people. But I would submit, if you keep ignoring your emotions, you're going to be more self-focused than you are if you don't until you start to understand them. And so you can break free from them. So make a case, if you would, for that.
Well, first of all, there are lots of different kinds of therapists. Some are better than others. If you're working with one, try one. And if you feel like, and you tell them, part of why I did these 3 practices, the third step, brave, is I want to get to action. I actually don't want to stay in therapy the rest of my life. I want to understand, I want to get to the root, and then I want an action plan, right? And if you have a therapist that's like, I'm not doing that, find another one, right?
Exactly.
Part of why I wrote this book is I believe in that. Therapy is a means back into healthy relationship. And again, when we get to braving, sometimes you have to leave a relationship to stay healthy. Sometimes you fight for change. Sometimes you have to figure out how to suffer a relationship wisely. But no matter what, you are going to therapy to get to the root of something, to do this work of naming, framing, so that you can have an action plan to be healthier in your life and in your relationships, not so that we silo off from people and don't interact with other people anymore because we're just looking at ourselves, right? And so change therapists if that starts to happen to you. You have some agency. You don't have to just trust whoever you end up signing up with for a first session. In fact, I encourage people to interview 3 therapists and tell them what you want and get a feel for, is this someone who can really help me toward my goals?
This is why I love you. I appreciate that so very much. That not all counselors are the same. When we come back, Doc, I'd love for you to share the story in the book where it was during this time where you were writing this book and you were on deadline, and you said you were you're coming, I think, out of a season of intense letting go of a lot of things. And the Lord led you to this apartment complex. I want you to just describe that season, what you were letting go of, what that was like for you, and then how and why you landed at this apartment complex and what God wanted to show you. I just feel like your story here is a case in listening to the Lord and following his lead. If you don't mind, we'll have that story on the other side. Dr. Alison Cook is my guest. I Shouldn't Feel This Way is the title of her book. Such practical help. I love this. She doesn't want anybody to stay stuck. You got to diagnose, you got to discern, you got to frame it in light of truth. And then you've got to brave change. There's action steps because you have agency. Whenever you hear people say, wish there was something I could do, there's just nothing I can do. I've got to say that's never true. There's always something you can do, and God will show you the next right steps to take. We'll be back in a minute. You know, your journey through life is full of twists and turns and learning and growing along the way. And you and I, well, we need guidance and direction for how to navigate life's highs and lows. Well, the book of Proverbs gives us great wisdom for the road ahead. Join us in reading the Bible together as we go through the book of Proverbs. You can sign up now and get a free downloadable study guide at myfaithradio.com. Thanks so much for tuning into Susie Larson Live, talking to Dr. Alison Cook today, who's got a brand new book titled I Shouldn't Feel This Way. Name what's hard, tame your guilt, and transform self-sabotage into brave action. I love this idea of pausing, creating some space in your life rather than just swatting away negative emotions and wondering why you feel that way, berating yourself for it, or ignoring the emotions. You're creating some time and space to go, why do I feel the way I feel? What's underneath it? What's behind it? What's true? What's not true? Give some time for that. Frame it in light of truth. And then God will give you she offers some great advice on braving change and finding that path forward so that you can be freer and healed and whole. Doc, in the book, you talk about a time in a season when you're writing this book, actually, where you were coming through an intense season of letting go. Explain what you mean and what that was like for you.
Yeah, we'd gone through a really intense season as a family with a potential medical diagnosis that ended up turning out okay, but was really challenging for several months. I was going through, on top of that, my own health challenges. I'd come off of a really intense season of work, and I'd written The Best of You, and just really letting go of a lot of illusions of things I took for granted, as basic as the health of a loved one, right? And until that happens to you, or as basic as your own health, until you go through that, you don't realize how much you take that for granted, right? And so that can stir up some real disorientation inside, some confusion inside. And then right on top of that, I had to go into writing this next book. I had a book deadline. I had a contract. This is how, for many of us, as you know, this is how we make, we support ourselves in many ways. This is work. We love it, but it's also work. And so it was really challenging. It was as if I was, riding on a wobbly surfboard, where the foundation underneath me, I was on a surfboard. I wasn't crashing, but it was wobbly. It didn't feel super sturdy going into that.
And in that time, you went for a drive and you landed at an apartment complex and you thought, why?
Yeah.
Why
so
here?
what happened Yeah. So what happened is I resorted to those old coping tactics, which are just work harder, kind of, just get it done, just make a schedule. I was really, and I felt really stuck because I couldn't accomplish my work. I would just, and this hadn't happened to me before. I couldn't get anything out. There was no output coming out of me. I couldn't write. I couldn't make content. I was really stuck. And to use that word that many of you have written in and said, I felt really trapped. And here I was trapped because I was like, I got myself, and here's the message inside my head was I got myself into that. I signed this contract and now I can't deliver. So just shaming myself and trying to pound myself to work harder, work harder, work harder. Wasn't working. One day I just thought, something happened inside of me. This isn't working. And I felt this nudge to get in our old minivan and drive down. I had no idea where I was going, Susie. It was very, and it kind of was something I used to do as a teen. When I was really overwhelmed or really trapped or really stuck, I'd get in my car and drive toward the mountains. I grew up near the mountains. And it was just, I didn't realize what I was doing. But now I understand I was just getting out of all that noise in my brain. I was putting myself in a different environment. I was changing the chemicals going into my brain because I was trapped in my own brain. And this is what happens to us. We're trapped in all that noise in our minds more than we're actually trapped by the circumstances. That's not to say the circumstances aren't hard. That's to say we get trapped in our own mind, right? And so I just started driving, and sure enough, as I'm driving, I'm sort of, I'm just starting to get different scenery. And I found myself just led by something deeper than my own thoughts. And I do believe it was the Holy Spirit inside of me. I think God works outside of our minds, our own, best efforts to beat ourselves into submission, which don't work. I found myself in front of this old apartment building I lived in 18 years ago. And it was the place I had gone when I had been dealing with a ton of anxiety and a ton of feeling stuck in graduate school almost 20 years ago. And I'd forgotten because I only lived there for 2 weeks. A family friend had given it to me when I had to take some time off from graduate school because of anxiety. And I sat there and was just transported back in time to that 2-week period where I had to pause. I had to stop grinding through graduate school. I had to stop all that incessant producing and performing and pleasing others and just be in this place. And I'd almost forgotten about it. It was 2 weeks, but it was transformative because I paused. I stopped trying to fix my problems on my own. I surrendered to God and to the fact that it had gotten too big for me. I let the ceiling fall in a way, and I found a place to land. And it just reminded me. Now, listen, we don't always all have 2 weeks to take off. And sometimes, even if we were to take that day off or that 2 weeks off, all we would do is continue to loop in our mind. So it's not just that we take the pause, it's what we do with the pause. But in that season, I really did do some things differently that allowed my brain to heal and gave me some new perspective. And that's what I want the listener to hear. It may not be 2 weeks in a new location that someone gives you. It may be that you start taking a walk every single day for half an hour. You intentionally say, I'm going to walk to that park because it's beautiful and I love the way the trees look this time of year. And in that half an hour, I'm going to let go of all these worries. And I'm going to look at that tree and I'm going to remind myself that spring comes. The new leaves of summer start to arrive. I'm not there right now, but God is good, right? It could be a half an hour a day. And it matters what you do with that time, right? It's not just that you take it. It's that you're intentional to release some of those fears, some of those worries, and put yourself in the path of beauty or goodness or something that's life-giving for you. This is what I mean. Notice what does bring you life. And then you intentionally put yourself in the path of it because that's where God meets us. Outside of all that looping mental activity is often where God finds us.
I got to jump in here. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful, Alison. And for me, that was a cup of cool water. And I do that every day, and I just behold the wonder of God. But who needed to hear that? Who needed permission to do that? I pray you'll come back, because I still have pages of notes that we haven't talked about yet. There's so much good in this book. Well done. Even in the fatigue, you wondered how you would do it. Well, you did do it. It's a great, great book, Doc. And I thank you for giving us your time today.
Thanks for having me. I so appreciate you in this time.
So beautiful. Thank you, friends, for tuning in today. I really pray you found some encouragement here. We'll meet you back here next time. Thank you for listening to this conversation from Susie Larson Live. These conversations are available because of your support. You can become a supporter now at myfaithradio.com. Please subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes, and then share it with friends so together we can all have a deeper life in Christ.
On the latest episode of the Wild God Stories podcast, we go to Africa.
I was raised in Sierra Leone in a community that truly lived the phrase, "It takes a village."
Until one day, the world outside Anita's village broke in.
I didn't grow up in a war zone, but I watched one unfold in the country I love.
God brought hope to her story and many others through radical provision.
God began to direct us towards Uganda, Africa.
I was born and grew up in the countryside of Ethiopia.
Nanjan I met in Kigali, Rwanda.
Discover how God showed up in the middle of war, loss, and impossible odds in Africa. Stories that'll make you say,
"Wow, God.
Wow, God.
Wow, God."
Wow, God Stories, wherever you get your podcasts.